I am Annalise, 20 years old, and I have no one to call family. My parents died in a serious car accident, the winter of my 16th birthday. The police found me in the emergency room, shivering in the coat my mother left behind. From that moment on, my whole world changed. No more warm dinners, no more jazz music from my father in the kitchen, no more the light scent of my mother's perfume as she kissed my forehead every morning. I moved in with my Aunt Ada, my mother's younger sister, the person I used to call my dear aunt. At the time, I thought I was lucky because at least I was still related by blood, but I was wrong. Very wrong. Her house was not open to me. It was only open enough for me to walk in like a freeloader. I was not called niece. No one asked how are you today. No one remembered my birthday, not even my aunt. They called me it, that little girl, freeloader. My room? A basement storage room, no windows, moldy walls, torn mattress and a flickering desk lamp. Even the air was thick with the smell of dampness and loneliness. Every night I huddled under the covers, listening to the footsteps upstairs echoing like a tormenting voice. Why are you still here? Aunt Ada often emphasized that they were taking care of me unconditionally. But what were the conditions? If not the times I was woken up at 5 a.m. to clean the house, the meals I only ate when everyone was full, the cold eyes when I coughed lightly because of a cold and didn't have a single pill. I thought, if I endured long enough, they would accept me. I studied hard, worked part-time, and didn't ask them for a penny. I lived quietly like a shadow, as if my existence was a mistake. Until one day, when I was refused to open a bank account because of bad credit, I realized they didn't just see me as a burden. They turned me into a borrower, to mortgage the house they lived in, the house that I was only allowed to enter through the back door. I used to be the daughter that no one wanted to keep, but they awakened the strongest part of me. If you have ever experienced the feeling of being looked down upon and left out like me, please leave a comment below so that BS-FamiFiles know that you are not alone, and so that together we can reclaim the value we deserve. I never had a key to my room. Actually, calling my place a room would be too kind. It was an old basement warehouse, dark and stuffy, hastily cleaned, and a dented foam mattress was stuffed into one corner. Every time it rained, water leaked from the pipes into the walls, creating a musty smell so strong that I had to put towels in the cracks of the door to keep the toxic air from getting into my lungs. The room had no lock, but even if it did, no one cared about my privacy. My aunt's eldest son, Jason, once went to rummage through my things to get my headphones, and when I protested, he narrowed his eyes and said, "You're not family. You have no right to touch anything in this house, understand?" I was not allowed to eat anything from the refrigerator without asking. At every meal, I was only allowed to sit at the table when everyone had finished eating, cleared the dishes, and ate whatever was left. There were days when there was only a bowl of white rice with leftover meat juice at the bottom of the pot, but I still smiled and said thank you to my aunt for fear of being considered ungrateful. I still remember the time when my aunt's youngest daughter, Anna, accidentally spilled milk, and my aunt turned to me, gritted her teeth and said, "Milk is expensive. Don't waste it when you're staying with her." I heard these words for 4 years. Every day. At first I was in pain, then I was numb. I learned to swallow both my pride and my self-esteem, just to live peacefully. Sometimes I heard my aunt say to my children right in front of me, "You guys have to study hard so you don't suffer like Annalise, living off other people's houses." I didn't dare cry. Crying would only give them more reasons to call me weak. Instead, I learned to be silent. So silent that sometimes I couldn't even hear my own voice. But I tried. I didn't let myself fall apart completely. I got a part-time job after school, first as a waitress at a bakery near my house, then as a house cleaner for an old lady who lived alone in the neighborhood across the bridge. I saved every penny to buy used books, borrowed computers from the library to study online. I signed up for free courses in design, accounting, body language, anything that would help me gain skills. Once my only pair of shoes had a torn sole. I wrapped them in duct tape and continued to work, because I didn't dare use my small savings to buy new ones. My aunt used to say, "The money you earn should be given to your family to take care of your children's education. You're being selfish when you spend it." And I, a child learning to live without anyone on my side, believed it. I didn't dare be sick, I didn't dare be late, I didn't dare skip school. I always got good grades, always on time, always said yes sir, just to be treated like a human being. But they never saw me as a member of the family. I remember my 18th birthday clearly. A big milestone, marking me becoming a legal adult. I waited, even if it was just a greeting, a small piece of cake. But all that day, I only heard my aunt yelling at Anna to study, Jason sneering when he saw me wearing an old faded shirt. What a piece of trash! I just smiled quietly, then went to work as usual. That day, my grandmother, who used to clean the house, gave me a piece of biscuit and a ballpoint pen. I almost burst into tears when I held it in my hand. Not because of its material value, but because for the first time in 2 years, someone remembered me as an individual. Sometimes I think about my parents. I imagine how angry they would be if they were still alive to see me treated like that, but it was because of my parents that I tried not to give up. I believed that if I lived right, lived decently, then everything would get better. Then my aunt would acknowledge me, then Anna would see me as her sister, then I would become a part of this family. I had convinced myself with fragile hopes for 4 years, and I had also forgiven many things that I should not have forgiven. Forgiving the contemptuous looks, the spiteful voices, the invasion of privacy, and even the times they told the neighbors that I was unemployed and unreasonable. Because in my heart there was still something that believed. After all, they are my mother's family. But it turned out that the title family, that I had held onto like a life buoy for so many years, was the rope that tied me to a vicious cycle of humiliation. The older I got, the more I understood. There were relationships that, even if they were blood related, did not mean love. Family is not only where you were born but also where you live as a human being. And then that fateful day came. I went to work at a coffee shop near my school, intending to open a bank account to transfer my savings. The bank employee flipped the computer screen, frowned and said to me, "Your credit is very bad. You have 2 unpaid credit cards, and you have a mortgage loan worth nearly $180,000. Can you confirm it for me?" I remember standing there frozen in front of the counter. My hands were shaking. My mouth was dry. I had never signed any papers. Everything after that was like a blow to the head. Every page of statements, every number, every expense, all had my name on them, but they were not me. And at that moment, right in the middle of the bank, when I first faced the so-called truth, I understood that all my patience in the past 4 years did not help me gain recognition. It only made me a tool for them to manipulate and exploit. I no longer shed tears. What flowed through me at that moment was a strange strength, a cold courage that I never thought I had. I had to stand up. I had to reclaim what was mine. The week of my 20th birthday, I decided to do something for myself. Not a party, not a cake or roses. I never dreamed of those things. I just wanted to buy myself a new phone, to replace the cracked one I had used since 10th grade. I stopped by the electronics store near my school and picked out a simple model with an installment plan. The clerk asked me to fill out a form for a credit check. I smiled, not suspecting anything. I had never taken out any debt. I worked part-time, saved every penny. I was the type of person who never spent more than I could afford. But a few minutes later, the clerk returned with a worried look on his face. "I'm sorry, your credit is terrible. Your FICO score is below 500. You have 2 outstanding credit cards and a mortgage that's in arrears. We can't approve your application." I thought I had misheard. I laughed, my voice shaking. Are you sure? I never signed up for anything. He nodded, handing me a summary report from the system. And right there, between the name and the social security number, were 3 words that sent a chill through my body. Borrower, Annalise Harper. I froze. My ears rang. My eyes darkened. My senses were numb. It was as if someone had just torn down all the trust I had worked so hard to build up after 4 years in that basement. I ran out of the store, grabbed the railing by the side of the road, and retched through tears. But these tears were different from the ones I had seen before. They were not weak. They were sobs of realization. It took me almost a week to follow up. I went to the bank, I called the credit union, I sat in the library for hours, going through each report, each statement. Each line was a punch to the gut. Credit card A opened in March 2022. Transactions at Target, nail salon, furniture store. Mortgage for $178,400. Title: Annalise Harper. Co-ownership: none. They took out the loan on that house in my name. Didn't ask me, didn't tell me. I remember the first night I walked into that house. Aunt Ada hugged me, stroked my hair, and said, "This is your house now." Turns out, she was telling the truth, just in the most brazen, cold way. The house was indeed in my nomina because I was valuable, but because I could be taken advantage of. I walked into the house on a gray afternoon, carrying a printout of my credit file. I couldn't breathe the whole way home. The hand holding the papers was soaked with sweat, shaking as if it was about to crush the paper. Aunt Ada was sitting on the sofa, watching a noisy reality show, eating popcorn and laughing. Her husband was sitting nearby, checking his gas and water bills. I stood there, in the middle of the living room, a place I had never dared to sit for long in the past 4 years, and said, "Aunt Ada, I have something to ask." She looked at me through her mascara, a little annoyed at the interruption. I walked over, put the stack of papers on the table, and opened a bank statement. She glanced at it, then sat up straight. Her eyes scanned each number, each line, then began to change from indifferent to stiff. "Why did you use my name to borrow money to buy a house?" Silence. Then she raised her eyebrows, curled her lips, her voice so smooth it gave me goosebumps. "You don't have anything to do. What are you going to do? Sue? You've been living in this house for years, consider it paying rent." I remember every word, every period. That sentence completely killed the last remaining human being in me. My whole world seemed to shatter. Every cell screamed, "You were wrong. You trusted the wrong person for 4 years." I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't smash things. I looked at her like she was a stranger. I didn't even hate her anymore, just felt empty. I nodded. Neatly. Resolutely. "Then from now on, I won't live in this house anymore. And you won't be able to live in peace with my name." I went back to the basement, packed up my belongings. There wasn't much of it. An old backpack, a notebook, a pair of shoes with torn soles, and that stack of papers, now the only thing I have of value. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. They didn't see me as someone to send off. That night, I took the bus to my classmate Mia's house, the one who had told me that if anything happened to me, I could stay there. When I knocked on the door, Mia looked at me, her eyes wide. "Oh my God, Annalise, what's going on?" I just laughed. A crooked laugh, but more peaceful than ever. "I just got kicked out of my own house, and I don't think I'm going back." Mia hugged me, tightly. The first hug in years that I didn't have to bow down to receive pity. I slept on Mia's sofa that night. No sheets, no blankets, but there was a window, there was moonlight, and it felt like for the first time, I could breathe freely. The next morning, I called the Abused Youth Advocates, a nonprofit I'd seen advertised at school. I laid out the story, sent in all the evidence. After a week, they called back. "We'll take your case, free of charge." I hung up the phone and sat there motionless. My heart was pounding. Not because of fear, but because for the first time in all those years, months of bowing my head in resignation, I could fight like a human being who has the right to say no. I started collecting more evidence. Emails. Copy of household registration. The message my aunt sent me last year. "Give me your social security information, so the procedure will be easier." I used to think it was a small thing. But now I know. It was the first step of betrayal. The day I sent the lawsuit, I wrote a handwritten letter, addressed to Aunt Ada. "Thank you for teaching me that family is not a place to bow your head. It is a place, if you can't step up you have to step out. See you, in court. I'm not afraid. Not anymore." They pushed me to the bottom, and from that bottom, I will rise. This is not the end, this is the beginning. I never thought I would walk into a law office. But on the third day, after moving out of Aunt Ada's house, I stood in front of a simple glass building with a sign above it, "Legal Center for Abused Youth, Free Assistance." As I walked in with my thick file, I was still shaking. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because this was the first time in my life I was demanding justice for myself. The lawyer, named Madison, was in her early 30s, with her hair tied back and a deep, steady voice. She listened to me from beginning to end. No interruptions, no quick conclusions. Just occasional nods, then notes in her notebook. When I finished by handing her bank statements and old text messages, including one where my aunt asked me to send her my social security number so she could sign me up for health insurance, she said only one thing. "Annalise, you're being taken advantage of, and not by accident. This is systemic financial abuse. We're going to help you." I burst into tears. Not because of the pain, but because for the first time in my life, someone was on my side, unconditionally. The weeks that followed were like nothing I'd ever experienced. Filing lawsuits, signing power of attorneys, describing the basement room for my records, finding every receipt, paper, photo, even asking Mia to go back to the house to secretly take more pictures of my former living space. Madison and her team worked tirelessly. They compared my signature with the signature on the loan documents, looked up suspicious transactions, contacted banks and credit unions to trace the source of the account opening. They also extracted my aunt's work history and discovered that the mortgage loan was made at a time when my aunt was in a period of financial instability because her husband had lost his job. They had planned it for a long time. And they chose me because I was weak, silent, and had no one by my side. I thought that leaving that house was the end, but it turned out that it was just the door to the journey to reclaim my value. 3 months later, the lawsuit was officially brought to court. I, as the plaintiff, Aunt Ada, the defendant, with her husband. The day I walked into the courtroom, my heart was pounding like a drum. I wore a simple white shirt, fully buttoned, my hair tied up. No makeup, but my eyes were straight, my voice clear. I was no longer the little girl hiding under the stairs listening. I was an adult, and I was demanding my right to live. Aunt Ada looked at me as I walked in, her eyes shocked and cold as ice. Maybe she still thought I wouldn't dare go all the way. Maybe she thought I would be like before, patient, silent, forgiving. But she was wrong. The trial lasted 4 hours. Madison presented her case logically, sharply. Each time she presented evidence to my aunt, from the forged loan papers, to the photos of the basement, to the ambiguous text messages, it was a blow to the moral veneer she had worn. Aunt Ada began to lose her cool. At first she denied, then she blamed, then she cried. But all of that was for naught when the judge concluded. Aunt Ada Harper and her husband used Annalise Harper's personal information to commit serious financial fraud. The mortgaged house will be repossessed, and all related debts will not be held responsible for the plaintiff. At the same time, the defendant is forced to compensate for mental and legal damages. I looked at my aunt, who was then face down on the table, her shoulders shaking, sobbing. But I knew very well, those were not tears of regret, but tears of someone who had just lost everything. The house they had once proudly boasted about, once called family home, once locked the door to prevent me from entering and leaving through the main entrance, now belonged to the bank. My name, which they had once despised, was now a knife that cut off the roof they thought was permanent. After the trial, I stepped outside. The cold, early autumn air, the wind whistling through my collar. I let out a deep breath. For the first time, I no longer had to bow my head, no longer felt like a freeloader. I was a winner, not with screams, not with punches, but with quiet maturity and steadfast courage. Madison shook my hand and whispered, "You did what many adults don't have the courage to do." I just smiled. But inside me, a flood of emotions flooded back: the leftover meals, the footsteps on the basement floor, the scolding, the contemptuous looks, the cold, windowless room. All of it seemed to be washed away from my memory. Not because I forgot, but because I stood up and overcame it. I moved into a dorm near the community college. The room was small and simple, but there was light, there were books, and there was soft music playing from my roommate's speakers. I worked part-time at the library, where people called me by my name, not it. One time, while I was organizing my bookshelves, I came across Michelle Obama's Becoming. The cover read, "Your story is what you have, what you will always have. It is something to own." I nodded. I understood. My story, full of scars, hurt, but also proof that I was not destroyed. On the contrary, I have reclaimed myself from the ashes. And I know, this is not the end. Life will have many challenges, but I have learned the most important thing. When no one protects you, be your own protector. I moved into a small dorm right next to the community college. There were no shiny furniture, no soft beds, no refrigerators full of food. But the first morning I woke up there, the sunlight streaming through the windows painted pale yellow streaks on the walls, and the birds chirping outside made me laugh. Laugh naturally, without being forced or guarded, just because I felt light. 4 years of living in a windowless basement had taught me to be grateful for the light. Now, I was starting over, no longer as someone pushed into a corner, but as someone who was actively stepping out of the darkness. I worked part-time at the school library, a peaceful job that made me feel appreciated. Every day I lived among books, among students laughing and talking, among dreams that were kindled in their eyes. I enrolled in graphic design. On the first day of submitting my application, I remembered Aunt Ada's contemptuous gaze when she found out I liked to draw. Drawing nonsense, you won't make a living. But now those nonsense strokes are becoming the tools for me to build my future, with the very hands that were once scolded as useless. One afternoon, after finishing my first project presentation, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. My hair was a bit messy, my eyes were still a bit tense, but my gaze was unusually bright. And I whispered, "I am no longer the girl locked in the basement. I am Annalise, the one who pulled herself out of the darkness, the one who dared to leave things that were no longer worthy, to find what she deserved. I do not take revenge with fire, nor with tears. I take revenge with a life so good that they no longer dare to look up when they see me." I know there are many other Annalise out there, people who are trying to survive in dark rooms, in toxic relationships, in families, who only take without giving back. If you are in the dark, remember, the light is not at the end of the tunnel. It is within you, just waiting to be lit. And if my story resonates with you, comforts you, or empowers you, leave a comment to let me know you are still here. Don't forget to follow the BS-FamiFiles channel, because every week, we will meet again, live together, heal together, with real stories and hearts that never give up.